y'all for coming out tonight. We really appreciate you attending tonight's Mayoral Forum on flood risk and adapting to environmental change. I am Dana Ennis, Director of the Urban Conservancy. The Urban Conservancy is delighted, truly delighted to host this event in partnership with the Greater New Orleans Foundation and our other sponsors, the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana, the Bywater Institute of Tulane University, the Tulane Institute on Water Resources, Law and Policy, the Lens, the Gulf Restoration Network, the Lowlander Center, the Okra Inn, WWNO, and the Water Collaborative of Greater New Orleans. I'd especially like to thank Urban Conservancy board members Lindsay Pick for conceiving of this forum, and Amy Stelly and Jeffrey Goodman for planning and design assistance. The moderated forum will give candidates the opportunity to answer questions about New Orleans' future with water. How will New Orleans respond to Louisiana's ongoing coastal land loss crisis and restoration efforts? What are the next steps for the city's flood protection? And what does the future of living with water look like? How will the city commit to climate change adaptation and the Paris Climate Accord? And more. Nathan Lott, Director of the Water Collaborative of Greater New Orleans, will moderate this discussion. A word on process, because I think this is really important for us all to understand. All 18 qualifying candidates were invited to participate in the forum by either telephone or email in mid-July and sent reminders in mid-August. The 8 participating candidates submitted their bios and personal statements by the required deadline in August. The candidates will be asked questions that were developed with input from the public. This forum is intended as a beginning of what we hope becomes an ongoing dialogue between constituents and city leadership, and a dialogue that's long overdue. It is an opportunity to listen tonight and learn where our candidates stand on these issues. Because our time this evening is limited, we ask you to write down questions that don't get answered and submit them at the questions table in the lobby before you leave, or record your question on the listening post outside in the lobby as well. And we will share them with the mayoral candidates. I'd like to welcome Andy Coplin, President and CEO of the Greater New Orleans Foundation, to the stage to say a few words.
Thank you. And good evening. It's great to see such a great crowd for such an exciting event tonight, and we at the Greater New Orleans Foundation are proud to join the Urban Conservancy in helping sponsor this. Our mission is for our region, the 13 parishes that we serve, but headquartered right here in New Orleans, to be a vibrant, sustainable, and just region for all. And that's why we support this kind of programming, and the work that we're doing in New Orleans around coastal restoration and living with water inside the levees is critical to our city's next 300 years. The flooding that we experienced in July and August requires us to remain committed to rethinking our urban water, stormwater management, and our hydrology, not just to making sure that we've got power and we've got pumping capacity, but rethinking the way we manage stormwater. Our coastal land loss, we've lost, amount of land the size of Delaware over the last generation, and we could lose even more if we don't adjust our practices. So there's no doubt New Orleans is a coastal city, and we are going to need the next mayor of our city and our civic leaders in the city to be committed to making sure that we can adapt and be resilient in terms of both coastal land loss and urban water management. At the foundation, we've been trying to do our part. We've spent about $2.4 million over the past 5 years giving grants to organizations that are in the fight. Through the Urban Water Series, we've been training leaders of Orleans and Jefferson and St. Bernard and Plaquemine around best practices in urban water management. Training professionals, architects, landscape engineers, and others in this work. We've also been working on the coast, convening organizations to give critical comments to the state's coastal master plan to make sure that the most vulnerable populations are included in that process. We also underwrote the city's climate action plan and the person who developed that on behalf of the city. Lastly, I want to say we think that living with water, coastal restoration are workforce issues, and the people of New Orleans ought to be the folks who rebuild our infrastructure and help us live with water. There's going to be about $3 billion, thank you. There's going to be $3 billion spent over the next decade by the Sewer and Water Board. There's going to be about $8 to $10 billion spent over the next decade by the Coastal Protection Restoration Authority. That infrastructure money has to be spent well, it has to be spent wisely, and it has to be spent including New Orleanians in the work. So thank you all so much for coming out and being committed to this. I want to thank all the candidates for participating, and again, welcome to tonight's Mayoral Forum.
Thank you, Andy. It's now time to begin this very important conversation. This is the first time that a New Orleans Mayoral Forum will focus exclusively on flood risk and adapting to environmental change. And I, for one, am very excited to hear what our candidates have to say. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Director of the Water Collaborative of Greater New Orleans, Nathan Lott. In his capacity there, Nathan works with architects, engineers, and planners to retrofit the historic city to combat flooding and subsidence. He has a depth and breadth of knowledge and a true understanding of the difficult topics we will cover here tonight. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you, Dana. All right, thank you, Dana. And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Let me begin by congratulating the voters in our audience. You've set aside part of your evening to participate in a fundamental part of the democratic process, learning where candidates stand on the issues that matter to you, your family, and your neighbors. Thank you. Out of respect for one another, please refrain from applause or talking during the question and answer portion of the forum. And also, please take a moment right now to turn off and silence your cell phones if you have not already. And now, let's bring out our candidates. And while they're taking their seats, I want to thank them for joining us tonight. By being here, candidates, you've demonstrated that you recognize the importance of the issues that we'll be discussing. By setting aside time in your busy campaign schedules, you've demonstrated that you understand that the stewardship of our great city means stewardship of our land, waters, and coast. The order in which the candidates are seated tonight was determined earlier today by a random drawing, with the campaigns present. The seating order will determine the order in which questions are asked. With each question, the first respondent will rotate. Questions will be asked by table, with some questions going to both tables over the course of the evening. The candidates were provided with a list of possible questions in advance. Those questions were sourced from the general public and reviewed by a team of experts in water and environmental policy drawn from the sponsoring organizations. This approach was designed to yield responses that are both succinct and substantive. Our goal isn't to surprise the candidates, but to inform you, the voters, on matters of leadership and policy. Now, allow me to introduce the candidates with us tonight and ask that you please hold your applause for them all at the end. Firstly, Troy Henry was raised in the Lower Ninth Ward in Pontchartrain Park. A businessman, his consulting firm contributed to the Unified New Orleans Plan, which guided reinvestment post-Katrina. Seated next to him, Matthew Hill is an entrepreneur and executive coach, proficient in the Lean Six Sigma approach to solving complex problems and creating efficient organizations. Judge Michael Bagnaris served as civil district judge for 20 years. Prior to that, he was executive counsel to Mayor Dutch Mayoral. Edward Bruschi is a retired member of the U.S. Air Force, a registered nurse. He came to New Orleans as a post-Katrina volunteer and now lives in Central City. Brandon Dorrington served in the U.S. Army before enrolling at Dillard University. He received his master's in criminology from Southern University and is an advocate for criminal justice reform. Councilmember LaToya Cantrell arrived in New Orleans as a student at Xavier. She served as president of Broadmoor Improvement Association before being elected to represent District B on the city council. Judge Desiree Charbonnet was the first woman elected to serve as recorder of mortgages for Orleans Parish, the first woman elected to the bench of Municipal Court of New Orleans, and the first to be elected chief judge. And lastly, Jonice Lamar Smith is a lifelong resident of the Crescent City who describes herself as a daughter of New Orleans. Let's have a round of applause for our candidates. Now, before we begin with our first question, each candidate will have 1 minute to answer each of our questions until we get to the yes-no lightning round. Candidates, let me remind you that we have a lot to cover tonight, so please be mindful of your time. Once time is up, I will give you the opportunity to finish your sentence, but then I will interrupt you so that we can carry on. And can I ask that you all nod to show that you understand the ground rules of tonight's forum? Thank you so much. All right, our first question will be for the candidates to my right, this table, and we're going to begin with Mr. Henry. The Greater New Orleans Urban Water Plan laid the foundation for living with water and for complementing our traditional pumps, pipes, and canals with green infrastructure. How will you spur investment in water-inclusive infrastructure projects, such as those in the Greater New Orleans Water Plan? And how would your administration support community-driven implementation with community involvement?
How long I got to answer that? A minute? Okay. Thanks, first of all, for having me at this event. This is an exciting topic for me. Many of you know my background is I ran water systems throughout the country. And so this is a segment that is very, very precious to me. Also, you may know that I've developed homes in a neighborhood that are water LEED certified homes as well. So when you talk about policy, I'm big on incentives as opposed to to sort of punitive types of efforts. So one, there are a number of permeable materials that I believe in using in our infrastructure developments. I also believe that as we build more and more of our homes and more of our residences, that we need to enforce those types of things. But more importantly than anything else, our sewer and water system today needs to be completely renovated and redone. I would advise you to go to troyhenry.com and see my press conference on sewer and water management to get a lot more depth and detail. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Matthew Hill. Thank you for being here. I want to offer a radically different approach to the way that we deal with water. Okay, no more concrete, no more asphalt as far as our streets are concerned. I want porous, recycled plastic as our top drivable layer. But under that, porous is wonderful, but that water needs to stay out of our water table. Look, we all know the reason why we're sinking is water gets down into the water table, we pump it out, and as the water drops, so does the soil, and that's what destroys the foundation on your homes. So what I'm saying is let's take all of that water and drain it into our street system so that under this porous plastic, we have an old school sewer system that's about 12 feet deep. And to stabilize this system, polystyrene, peanuts, because it compresses, it never takes on water, and as it compresses, it gets stronger. So we want that at the base of the system to keeping it stable. Thank you.
The question was about investments, right? Spur investment. Thank you. First of all, we should recognize that the problem is not one of revenue, it's one of fiscal management. We should take advantage of the monies that we already have, which we don't do. We have $141 million that HUD has already turned over, which we're about to give back unless we use. So we got to have good fiscal management as we deal with our infrastructure system. When we also have $2 billion that we've only used $700 million thus far. So we got to take advantage of what we have. The other thing we have to do is we have to implement Article 23 of our comprehensive zoning ordinance, which indicates that all new structures must be responsible for 1 1/4 inch of the waters that they have before it. And we should somehow incentivize existing structures to do the same. And that's what the Begnaris administration would do.
Thank you. What we need to do is we need to attract people to come here. And what we need to do is offer opportunities for these companies to implement all these policies. And when we do in our home inspections, we need to make sure that people aren't over paving, cement everywhere where nothing is just absorbed and it just creates runoff. So what we need to do is we need to attract businesses that want to come here, that want to invest in us and help us with our problem. Because right now, let's face it, folks, we got a problem. I just went down Canal, U2 traffic, believe me, there's still standing water on Canal. When's the last time has it rained? So we need to invest in ourselves also, get these drains cleaned out, and attract people to come here with business incentives to invest in us. Because we're gonna, look, we're in this for the long haul. And that's just a couple ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ruski. All right, thank you for those thoughtful answers. Our next question will be for the candidates on my left. You will each have 1 minute to answer, and Brandon Dorrington, you will be the first to answer this question. How will you incentivize small-scale stormwater management improvements at the neighborhood and homeowner level?
Thank you very much for that question. And I'm glad you asked me the question first, but I'm not so happy to answer the question first, being that I'm the only male at the table with females, maybe. Okay.
It was luck of the draw,
Okay.
shall we say, luck of the draw.
Okay, that's fine. Well, you know, I would have to say that from a neighborhood, community, tax-paying citizen, resident of New Orleans perspective, I would first approach that by conducting surveys, interviews, and case studies of the people in the neighborhoods to get their input. Because after all, they live there 365 days a year. Sewerage and Water Board, Department of Public Works, they have a staff that gets out to only limited parts of the city due to the economy of time. So the residents will have the greatest input and recommendation to bring and deliver to the Sewerage and Water Board, to Department of Public Works.
And thank you, Mr. Dorrington. That's your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cantrell.
Good evening, and thank you again for having us. In regards to incentivizing small businesses and homeowners, was that the question? I would, one, look to develop a program within the Sewerage and Water Board that would incentivize homeowners who are capturing their stormwater in a way that it can lower their bills. I would also ensure that the city invests in programs like the Urban Conservancy, one that, and I've been doing that as a council member with Harris grants, but I would look to scale that up to help residents remove slabs, also to improve how they live with water, catching water in their backyard or the front yard, scaling up projects that we know are effective in terms of keeping that storm water on site as opposed to running into the streets and into becoming, I'm losing my train of thought. But bottom line is, I would continue to implement programs that I have while I've been on the New Orleans City Council and a community leader.
Thank you. Okay. And Judge Charbonnet, you're up next.
Hello. Yes. Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate the invitation. I think education is key where this is concerned. I don't know that we educate ourselves and this community enough about the alternatives in terms of capturing stormwater, et cetera. And for the neighborhoods and businesses, I think we have to encourage everyone by giving them what they need to capture this water. So I would say that the city should provide the receptacles to the homeowners and give them that so that they can get started, and that it's not really, the onus is not on you all. So I would also want to show you how much money you would save by using those receptacles to preserve your water. So I think the encouragement is in giving you what you need to get started in conserving the water.
Hello, my name is Johnny Smith. My number is 26, and my platform is kingdom building. We must preserve ourselves, and I'm going to answer this question best as I can. In reference to incentives and on a small scale of stormwater, here's what I would do. If you ever heard of Willy Wonka, I would do a golden ticket to everyone who owns property. And what would happen is those homeowners who have the golden ticket, you will immediately call that number to the 311 emergency plan, and you will become the captain. You will be responsible for a certain amount of blocks, and you will clean those storm drains. In turn, you will have your property taxes free. Because guess what? You're involved, and we will also put your name on a virtual, letting everyone know during our storm season that this is the captain that you all can report to. And you will have your taxes free. And it will be random to the next homeowner. Every year will change.
That's your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Now, our next question will be answered by the candidates to my right, but this is one of the two questions for the night that all candidates will have the opportunity to answer before we leave. Matthew Hill, you have the first crack at this one, Mr. Hill. The question is, what steps would you take as mayor to improve the transparency and effectiveness of the Sewerage and Water Board?
Well, I specialize in a thing called Lean Six Sigma. It's not the most interesting thing, but it is vastly bit more important than anything else. Lean Six Sigma goes into any system, any organization. We pull out every piece of waste in every process. Now, transparency is kind of strange because it doesn't necessarily apply in this situation. Because what you do is you constantly measure every movement of every process. And because we always measure it, yes, we could give you the numbers, but those numbers aren't necessarily important to you as the citizen. The outcome is the important thing. So if you want to get your pothole fixed, okay, you have to fix the process to fix the pothole. Fort Wayne, Indiana, from the moment you call their 311 and say, I have a pothole in front of my house, to the moment they're done, 2 hours, because they redesigned the system.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. And now, Judge Bagnaris, same question. You're on.
In order to determine what you're going to do about transparency, I believe you have to know what you're going to be transparent about. And in that regard, we should take a look at the National Regulatory Research Institute, have them come down and look at actually the whole structure, not simply the equipment that we have and what needs to be done with the equipment, but also look at the positions and determine what are the qualifications for those positions. And not only the qualifications and the positions, we need to look at the structure itself. Should Sewage and Water Board, for instance, be part of the city? Should it be its own political entity? Should it belong to the Public Service Commission? We need to look at the whole gamut. And then after we do that, and we make the determinations into what road we're going to go down, we put it up on the internet for transparency. And we let all the citizens know. All they have to do is tune in, and whatever it is we're going to be doing, they can check it out themselves.
Thank you. Mr. Bruschi.
Oh, yes, thank you. First and foremost, I want a complete review of every dime the Sewage and Water Board got and spent. That's the first step in transparency. Where's all this money? Every dime. And now they want to increase stormwater fees? And then our board's going up another 10%? Transparency, the idea of the internet is perfect, where you got to go in, you can see what's going on, see the status of what's going on with this turbine, what's going on with this pump station. But as mayor and president of the board, the buck stops with me, and I will be speaking directly, holding public meetings, letting everyone know what's going on, even if it's a little text, like I don't know how many of you got about air quality just on the way here. We have to be public about what's going on. No more cronyism, no more any of those isms. We need to know what's going on, and as mayor, I'm in charge, and I will be speaking with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Henry, same question to you.
Hello. There are 3 tiers of changes that I would implement as mayor. First is on the regulatory side, the city council will now become the actual regulator of the Sewer and Water Board. Second, the Sewer and Water Board will be comprised of individuals that have professional water management knowledge and not just political appointees. The third piece is there's a whole host and series of technical initiatives that need to be done. First of all, we need to migrate out of the 25 cycle power. 25 cycle power went out in 1932. That decision between 60 cycle and 25 cycle went out then. Second of all, we need to put in place an entire leak management program, a barrel management program. You say, what's a barrel management? You know, all those orange barrels that are all over. Every water system that I've run, we had a 21-day max barrel management program in place. We got barrels in my mom's street that has a tree growing through it. It's been there that long. Okay, so we will put in place an entire performance management structure to ensure that every single element of our operation is properly managed, we know about it, and we can maintain it. When I ran water systems all over the country today, I had a dashboard from every city that I was running: Jacksonville, Laredo, Atlanta.
Thank you, Mr. Henry.
Thank you.
That's your time. Thank you. All right, our next question is the second one that all candidates will get an opportunity to answer through the course of the forum. This time it's going to be answered by the candidates on my left, and we will begin with you, Councilmember Cantrell. The question is, our water resources are not confined to the borders of Orleans Parish, but how they're managed often changes at the parish line. What role, if any, should New Orleans take towards coordinating water management and coastal restoration at the regional level?
Okay, it's on. I think, and definitely we have to take on our approach that we did post-Katrina when we worked collectively across parish lines to advocate for offshore royalties for coastal restoration practices. I think, of course, working together and thinking regionally is the best way that we're going to not only protect the city of New Orleans, but also the surrounding parishes. We are not in this alone. And so leveraging resources will be the best way in order to gain better control over stormwater management practices and to fully implement the urban water management plan that we have in New Orleans. We're also going to have to work collectively, in my opinion, to get more of the tax dollars generated off of the backs of the people of the city of New Orleans to get more from. Right now, we retain 1.5%. We know that we need additional dollars to fully implement and improve infrastructure here that will impact the state of Louisiana as a whole.
Thank you. Judge Charbonnet, same question to you.
I agree with the regional approach, and I've been saying that the entire time I've been on the campaign trail. We can no longer afford to consider ourselves, Orleans Parish, as our own little island in this finite line around the parish. We are stronger when we work with the region. I think what's important here is that we all understand the mutual benefit that we get. And then it's important for you to know this. Your leaders must get together, and then we need to incorporate you into the discussion. I think what happens is too often leadership does something and then just tells you, okay, so this is what we're doing now. You should be a part of that. But I think the important part is understanding how this benefits both parishes and what needs to be done before you can even figure out what it's going to cost to do it. So inclusion is extremely important. It's something I absolutely support, well beyond just the water management issue.
Thank you. And now Ms. Smith.
I'm sorry if I'm having a little cold, but I believe the question was what role we're going to play, and the role we're going to play is a primary role. Why? Because we're New Orleans, and we are the hosting city to all 64 parishes. So from that, we need to do an infrastructural design where all 64 parishes is under one water system, because here's why. At one time, New Orleans used to, families used to go to the projects for resilience, and the other families will go to Baton Rouge. We can't do that anymore, and 60 to 70% of our 64 parishes is now going underwater. We cannot take any chances of the only way for us to escape is through air flight. So we have to get with every parish and begin to start a water structure system where it go past all the way to all 64 parishes. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Mr. Dorrington, same question to you.
Thank you very much. I think that a tri-parish collaboration initiative alignment should be set in place. The ideology, the concept and the perspectives that our neighboring parishes, such as Jefferson Parish, have taken into consideration when it comes to safety, maintenance, and preventative measures for flooding and hurricane protection. New Orleans is one of the most economic producing cities in the regional area. So if we're going to go to a regional approach, I think we need to start with a tri-parish collaboration and be aligned with Jefferson Parish and St. Bernard Parish. Therefore, eventually we can get to the point where we become the regional lead and a regional example, not only for this region, but for other regions in the United States that have issues with water and flooding and storm protection. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next question is only for the candidates on my right, and it deals with workforce training and development. We will come back to that question in a moment. Yes. But for now, question to this table, we're going to start with Judge Bagnaris, is the following. Water management is among the fastest growing and highest paying sectors in the state. What workforce training and placement strategies will you implement to harness the large green infrastructure and water resilience projects slated to be made in the next few years within our city? How will you publicize those opportunities for those most in need?
New Orleans is ground zero when it comes to green infrastructure. I would like to be the first mayor to start an office of family service and education inside City Hall. And as part of that office of education, we would reach out to traditional, first of all, VOTEC, which is going to be important in terms of developing a lot of the green infrastructure that we're talking about. In addition to that, we're going to create partnerships with the universities. So that particularly their urban studies programs, we're going to encourage them to go back. For instance, Tulane Loss's civil engineering program, we're going to encourage them to reinstitute that. And the ones that have civil engineering, we're going to expand upon it because that's an important part of green infrastructure. We're going to ask all of our universities to assist with urban planning and have a subspecialty of green infrastructure. We're going to put out the information by virtue of the internet once more. Everybody is going to know what training is available.
Thank you. Mr. Broski.
Thank you. That's a great idea, but we need to take it a step further. We need to institute trade schools back into the high school so we can get these young people today educated so when they're ready to graduate high school, when they walk into these programs, they're not having to spend their own money in learning these. We have a responsibility as a city to educate the needs of the children for what we need. We're going to need all these types of welders, electricians, plumbers. We need to start early. We need to get trade schools back into working for the city. The school board works for us. We don't work for the school board. So that's another program that we can start with. And that's just simple. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Broski. Mr. Henry, question goes to you.
Yes, Tulane didn't eliminate their civil engineering program. They still have it. Workforce training is an important element across the city of New Orleans today. Community colleges will play a tremendous role in helping with the water management opportunities that exist here today. The biggest challenge in the city of New Orleans and the reason water management is growing today is because the city's not growing. It's not that it's a burgeoning industry as much as it is the city is actually not growing when it comes to job and economic growth. So part of what you will understand, my plan is to grow the city as a whole. How will I do that? I'll migrate 40,000 new jobs to the city of New Orleans through an aggressive recruitment of Fortune 1000 companies. I expect to call on 200 of those Fortune 1000 companies, and I expect an 8 to 10% success ratio. That's 16 to 20 Fortune 1000 companies that are here in New Orleans that transforms the economy associated with it. The training that goes along with water management individuals will be the same training that we'll be using to prepare those individuals for Fortune 1000 opportunities here. That level of rising tide is the type of economic growth this city needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hill.
Well, before we get into training, I'm going to ask y'all a question. You can answer it to yourselves. Do you recycle? Do you take your trash and do you separate it and put it into the proper bins? I ask you this because after the flood on the 5th, and I was doing cleanup, I was going and putting stuff in trash cans up and down the street. And guess what I saw in each of those trash receptacles? Stuff that could be recycled. This comes down to, you know, we can be as green as we want, but you need to change the way that you deal with your trash. Yes, we have a very poor recycling system, but we really need to change our behaviors. And that's, I mean, the same goes with water. How do we treat our water? But I think you need to start with how you deal with your trash.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. All right, our next question will be fielded by the candidates to my left. And Judge Charbonnet, you have the honor of answering first. Do you plan to end, continue, or improve upon the city's existing climate action strategy and resilience strategy? Why or why not?
I plan to continue implementing the resiliency strategy. The city has an entire department dedicated to that. Mr. Hebert, who is now the CAO, he ran it very effectively. So I think it absolutely should be incorporated, the climate action strategy. We are seeing the effects of climate change in this city. And I know when we had the flood on August 5th and the director said that, we don't believe that that was the real reason that happened. But and setting that aside, we are being affected by climate change. So that, I would definitely continue that. I think it's very worthwhile.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Smith, same question to you.
I think you're asking me something towards, city existing climate action strategy or in
Yes.
that area?
Would you continue the existing climate action and resiliency strategies? Why or why not? What would you change?
I would say no, and here's why. I looked over your plans. It's 8 designs. And out of those 8 designs, somewhere along the way, it kind of like touch but don't touch. I got it. I think this neighborhood, no. We can't do that. And here's why. Because this plan does not include what I would think would be considered a rapid rebuilding plan. If you know anything about ants, if you knock over the mound, you see that there is an army that comes out, and then once the army comes out, then you have another group that comes out and they survey the land. Then you have another group comes out and they look to see what's going on, and then they begin to rebuild.
All right, thank you, Ms. Smith.
I'm
That's your
sorry.
time. Thank you. All right, and now, Mr. Dorrington, your turn.
Thank you very much. I think that the current climate action strategy should remain. However, it should be upgraded, it should be amended, and it should be enhanced. For example, we need 21st century technology. We need collaboration with experts such as environmental justice, researchers, critical analysis, and those that have more than 15 or 20 years of experience in climate restoration, in climate action. So the current strategy that we have is good, but just like anything else, it needs to be upgraded due to time, increased technology, more collaboration from those who may have a PhD in environmental justice, those who have taken the time to work in nonprofits, who have worked in different places throughout the country, that may want to even collaborate with different universities and colleges.
Thank you, Mr. Dorrington. Thank you.
Absolutely. I would not only keep and adhere to the climate plan, I think it is extremely important for the future of the city of New Orleans. We are on a great track record, in my opinion, of reducing greenhouse gas and emissions from our environment, and I think that we have taken a lead in our country. And particularly, with cities being connected, and now with what's going on federally, it's really requiring us to be more connected in terms of reducing emissions and to ensure that, hey, we are creating an environment that could be around for generations to come. In regards to the resiliency plan and the Office of Resiliency, I am in favor as well as keeping that. I would, however, like to ensure that we not only have unclassified employees, but classified to ensure that the office is in place regardless of a mayoral administration, but it lives on through government so that we are sustainable.
Thank you, Councilwoman Cantrell. All right, we will now go back to a question that was answered earlier by candidates to my left, which dealt with coordinating water management with other parishes. I'm going to read it again for the candidates on my right, and we're going to begin with Mr. Brusky. Our water resources are not confined to the borders of Orleans Parish, but they are managed often differently at the parish line. What role, if any, should New Orleans take towards coordinating water management and coastal restoration at a regional level?
We should be the leader, first of all. I mean, we have the size-wise, as opposed to some of the other cities, they look up to us. And as mayor, we have to make sure that we coordinate, discuss, open door policy, work amongst each other to try to figure out any of the issues that we may have. Cooperation, transparency, all that. So if we're able to work together, we'll be able to come up with an answer to most any question, because I tell you what, this group, the city and the resiliency of the city, we should be the forefront, and cooperation is the key. Thank you.
Thank you. Now to you, Mr. Henry.
Today, Sewerage and Water Board and City is already coordinating regionally with Jefferson Parish. We need to continue that, as well as with St. Bernard Parish. We need to continue that. But my priority and focus is going to be on the most vulnerable of all of the systems, which is the Sewerage and Water Board. It is a mess. If you think it's a mess with the stormwater, that's the simplest of the 4 systems that we have today. We've got water, wastewater, as well as metering are all a mess. And so we've got to do that. We've got to focus on water quality. We've got tremendous water quality challenges that just haven't had a crisis yet for everybody to know about them. It didn't flood. It doesn't represent a flood. We've got an issue with power. I talked about 25 cycle power. It's a tremendous problem. All these fires you hear going on now, it's all related to 25 cycle power. We got staffing challenges. In a city where African American unemployment is over 40%, to have 300 plus openings in a job, to have guys get in a hole and fix something is almost criminal. Total operations need to be properly managed. We need to go to automated metering, AMI technology. That's a 20-year-old technology that still isn't implemented in Orleans Parish.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Mr. Hill.
Okay. As Mr. Henry said, we already do have coordination on the regional level. But I do want to take the lead, and you lead by example. And I don't know if anybody knows this, but the reason why the Sewage and Water Board is separate from Public Works is because one deals with storm surge and the other deals with rainwater. Okay, if we want to be more coordinated, we need to put them together. I will dissolve the Sewage and Water Board with your vote. But, well, it's going to have to be a referendum. Y'all are going to have to make that decision. But it was originally meant to be under Public Works when the Mayoral administration renamed Public Works to be that way. Because if we keep dealing with the same kind of water and we keep divvying it up in different ways, then we're never going to be able to coordinate our system. That's why we're in the mess that we're in now. We need to put the entire system together and manage it correctly.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. And now, same question to Judge Bagneris.
Regional cooperation. Who's going to be against that concept? We all want to cooperate, and if we can cooperate regionally, yay. The only problem with that is we can't get internal cooperation. We don't know. The Sewage and Water Board doesn't know what the Department of Public Works is doing, who doesn't know what Park and Parkway is doing, who doesn't know what streets is doing. So before we get to regional cooperation, how about a little internal cooperation among ourselves? That's why we keep digging up the streets and doing it over again. That's why, because we're not talking with each other. The departments aren't talking among themselves. So we start there. And maybe instead of being a leader, I know I'm a New Orleanian, I want to lead too, but maybe we should sometimes be humble enough to look at our neighbors and take and mimic them. You know, Jefferson Parish already has permeable streets. Jefferson Parish already dealt with the Wally Pontiff Park and made it double as a pond. We got lots of parks. They're not doubling as water ponds. You know, that's what we should do.
Thank you. The next question is also one that has been answered before. This time we're going to turn to the candidates on my left and begin with Ms. Smith. What steps would you take as mayor to improve transparency and effectiveness of the Sewerage and Water Board?
Sorry, time is passing, I know. But if you do recall, we're going to just put this transparency word to rest, because eventually we're going to just strip it naked. Next thing you know, transparency was in the room, and we just didn't listen to it. His name was Darrell Haywood. He's a Sewage and Water Board employee, and he said that we share, it's difficult to address, and I'm quoting, problems like those that exacerbated Saturday's flooding August the 5th, because decisions have to be made at the department head, leaving supervisors and employees powerless. That's exactly what an employee said. He was transparent. He told you that the problem started at the head. There's absolutely nothing wrong with Sewage and Water Board. The problem was the head. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. And now to Mr. Dorrington, same question to you.
I think the Sewage and Water Board could maybe adopt community advisory boards. I think the Sewage and Water Board could maybe enhance and upgrade the requirements and the qualifications for the Sewage and Water Board members, maybe primarily having a background in environmental justice, coastal restoration, or flooding safety and protection. And also, I think to have more transparency, quarterly inspections, such as maintenance and safety, semi-annual inspections, annual inspections. If we do quarterly and annual inspections, we can have a better grasp on the maintenance. It could be done in a more timely manner, increase effectiveness, and also be a preventative measure rather than a reactionary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dorrington.
Thank you. In regards to transparency, I think that we need that right now. There is a current assessment that is being conducted, a 100-day assessment that is being done, and I am pushing for and advocating that the public is not given smoke and mirrors, but they're given the facts about the existing conditions within the Sewage and Water Board. I believe that the leadership and management of the Sewage and Water Board is very much important. It's critical. Having someone with skill sets and core competencies to lead that organization, to build morale, to hire up, and to get results on the ground has to be paramount as well. Also, looking to educate the authorities who have appointing power that is tied to the legislation, that they are recommending appointments of individuals, again, who have a skill set and a background in water management, engineering, drainage, you name it. But definitely it needs to be about getting results and people who have the competency to do that.
Thank you, Councilmember Cantrell. Judge Charbonnet.
I'm going to use the 180-day transition period to conduct my own investigation, audit that's going to tell us operationally and fiscally what happened. And then that's going to be reported online for you. So that's the answer to the transparency. Then we're going to analyze that report. Not only am I going to use licensed engineers that are currently here, but I am going to insist on bringing in some of the licensed engineers that operate the system in Jefferson Parish, because Jefferson Parish is doing it right. And there's no need to reinvent the wheel if we can catch a hint from our neighboring parish. So that brings back the concept of the regional concept. Then I think it seems pretty obvious that however we decide the Sewage and Water Board's going to operate, whether it's a board or a city agency again, it should be a licensed engineer, that is the director, and the majority of those running it should be licensed engineers. I know it sounds like common sense, but apparently that is not what happened in the past.
Thank you, Judge Charbonnet. All right, our next question is for the candidates to my right, and it asks about the differences between the way the state evaluates public works projects and the way that they are evaluated here in Orleans Parish. Mr. Henry, you are up first with this question. State law requires agencies to evaluate a project's compatibility with the state coastal master plan before giving it the green light. By contrast, the city scrutinizes only a limited number of local projects for compatibility with our resilience strategy. Should the full range of capital and road projects in the city be screened for best practices under both plans?
The answer is yes. The problem, though, is not do we have policies that are properly in place. The problem we have is execution. And we have a government, we have a city government today that doesn't do anything well consistently. So to say that you've got do we need to pass more laws and more policies? I don't think that's the case. What we need is someone that understands how to hold people accountable and how to make sure that they deliver on the services that citizens in New Orleans expect and what they pay for in their tax dollars. So does the state do some things right? Absolutely. Does the city do some things right? Very little under this current administration. Try to get a permit. Be a builder, be a developer. Try to get a permit and go to City Hall and see how it goes. We are totally dysfunctional there. So it's not about the policies and laws that are in place. It's that we don't have people who understand how to execute through a large, complex organization to get absolute results that citizens expect out of their government.
Thank you, Mr. Henry.
Well, Troy kind of just stole all my thunder there. But I guess the short answer is yes. And I don't think I really need to build on what he said. It is a mess. We all have seen the Sewerage and Water Board come out and tear up the same street over and over and over again. Obviously, there's no coordination with the state plan when it comes to that. But what I keep saying is that we need to be our own system. I don't care what the region is doing. If we are going to move forward and do something like a street system that's not just permeable, this is actually a giant irrigation system. We won't ever flood. And I really don't care what Jefferson is doing. We can take on pretty much half of their water with the system that I am proposing. Look, if we want to stop the way that we are eroding, the way that we're flooding, then we need to think beyond just tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Judge Bagneris, to you.
Clearly, this is another situation in which the city has simply dropped the ball. It's a situation where, very similar to what we stated earlier, you have to have the departments, all the departments have to communicate with each other. That's why implementation is not taking place, because there's no coordinated activity within the affected departments. Not simply in terms of the streets having to be done over and over again. Even when a job is completed, we don't have the proper monitoring to ensure that the job was completed correctly. That's why concrete is being poured down the drain from the contractors. One contractor finished off a job that he did for Dryads, where he had to spell the name out, and he spelled it D-R-Y-A-D-D, Dryad. Yeah, and we paid the contractor. Yeah, yeah, that's the kind of situation we're in.
Thank you, Mr. Buskey.
I don't think anyone's going to disagree with this. Yes, we need to follow the guidelines, but more importantly, as the judge also stealing my thunder too, accountability. You have to have people held accountable for their actions. If you make a mistake, say, I made a mistake. Just like what they were at the council right after the flood. All those people, all they wanted to hear was the truth. Just accountability. That's all we're asking for. And let's follow the guidelines. Real quick, is students from Ben Franklin here? Hey guys, sorry I was late. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bruschi. All right, we've come to our final long answer question. And Brandon Dorrington, it's going to be back to you to answer first. The question is, due to the BP oil spill settlement, the city is eligible to receive millions of dollars for coastal restoration projects and can compete for millions more in settlement and matching funds. As these projects are critical to community resilience, how would you take full advantage of these funding opportunities?
Well, thank you very much for that question. How we could take full advantage of the millions of dollars from the BP oil spill, we could initially invest in coastal restoration. New Orleans will not survive as the world evolves due to us geographically being in a bowl. So number one is survival. Coastal restoration investment. There's a substantial amount of money. So investing a substantial amount of money into coastal restoration would be wise, it would be transparent, and it would be, as an elected official, it's supposed to be accountable to the people. Additionally, with that funding from that oil spill, we can have the money to hire different researchers, different experts, so we can enhance the technology that's needed in order to go forward in the future.
Thank you. Councilmember Cantrell.
Yes, I would continue to leverage the resources that we have. You spoke about the 141 million. There's an additional 2.4 million. There are opportunities even for us to go for WIFIA funds, and that's the Water Infrastructure Funding Investment Act with EPA that are dollars on the ground. There were billions of dollars allocated by the federal government for 2017. Hopefully the city of New Orleans will submit a letter of intent for 2018, but we need to leverage. But in order to leverage effectively, it really goes back to having accountability within the systems who will be managing the projects and ensuring that when the projects are being implemented, that there's real coordination to therefore not only get the results that we're looking for, but using our money wisely. These dollars are one-time dollars, and so we have to make certain that we're using them effectively, and Title 44 with the federal government doesn't play, so we definitely do not have any money to pay it back if we misspend.
Thank you. Judge Charbonnet.
Is this on? Yes. I would use my city attorney's office to look into this, to the settlement and make sure, first of all, I'm going to create a recovery section for the city attorney's office and revamp it completely. But I would have them look at all the lawsuits, make sure we know every single dollar that's out there, and then have them go after that. Lawyers, I think, are the best people to do this particular job on behalf of the city. So I'd completely rely on my lawyers to go after that money for sure.
Well, I think in reference to my response to this question, I would believe coastal restoration comes first. Second, the city's resistance consists of 64 parishes. Let us remember, we have to think 64 parishes. And in reference to resilience, we remember our resilient plan at one time in New Orleans was if you live in the lower coastline and you were poor, you go to your cousin's house in the projects, and then, you know, if you had any money, you would go to Baton Rouge and just chill out and then come home, we clean up, and then we go back to work. So we have to think about 64 parishes. We are a kingdom. We are one nation, black and gold. We have to think parish, 64. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. All right, now it's time for some rapid-fire questions. These questions will be answered by all 8 candidates, and for simplicity's sake, we're going to go from my right to left for all 3 questions, meaning we'll start with you, Mr. Henry, for each one. Please keep your answers to yes or no, so monosyllabic answers only. And here's the first question. Would you consider turning the city's sewer and water systems over to a private contractor?
Possibly.
No.
Absolutely no.
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 Thank you all.
One political answer.
Great. Here's question number 2. All right, we will start again with Mr. Henry. Will you commit to meeting regularly with environmental experts and citizen stakeholders assembled by the Water Collaborative to maintain an open dialogue about city policies and projects?
Yes.
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 And yes.
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 Only. Only.
All right. That's my job security question, so I appreciate it. All right. Now, our third and final lightning round question. Would you push for wider compliance of Article 23? For example, requiring all businesses, not just new construction projects, to manage the first 1.25 inches of water on site?
Possibly.
Orange. I mean, no.
Part 1, yes. Part 2, no, because it's unconstitutional. You can't require somebody to do something that the law has already allowed them to do.
Gray area.
Mr. Dorrington.
Question in number 1, yes. Question number 2, no.
I'd say the same, yes and no.
I would say yes, but you have to consider whether things are affordable for people to force them to do that. Not everybody can afford it.
We're not resilient enough? No.
All right, thank you for all those answers. That concludes the questions for tonight's forum. We thank you for your thoughtful answers, and it's time now for closing remarks. Each candidate will have 1 minute for your final statement. I remind you all to please be mindful of the time again. We'll begin on my far right with Mr. Henry and move towards the left. Audience, I ask that you please hold your applause until all 8 candidates have spoken. Mr. Henry.
Thank you for having me this evening. I appreciate being here. Tonight, we're talking about the mayor of New Orleans. The mayor of New Orleans is the CEO of the second largest employer in the city of New Orleans. Has over 4,000 employees, $1 billion operating and capital budget with union and non-union organizations associated with it. I'm the only candidate here running today that really qualifies for the job, quite frankly. The only one that's managed over 100 people in this list. The only one that's managed over $100 million ever. The only one that's managed unions and non-union enterprises. The only one that's actually migrated jobs to an enterprise in a municipality. The only one that's actually delivered municipal services on behalf of a public in a community, and I've done it for multiple cities. Only one that's actually managed a DBE program. Only one that's actually fixed a street, fixed a leak, fixed a pipe, actually developed and redeveloped a neighborhood, actually Pontchartrain Park, actually implemented a performance management system on a citywide basis for municipal operation. So when you look at qualifications, let's look at who can actually run and implement and manage the second largest employer in the city of New Orleans. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henry.
My name is Matthew Hill, number 46, and I want to thank you all for being here tonight. I know you could have been doing a bazillion and a half other things. But what I offer, if it hasn't been obvious, is very different from what all the rest of these candidates have. I'm not just talking about ideas. I'm talking about proper management. What I offer is going into every single process of every single system that this city deals with and straightening it all out so that we can, yes, get a pothole fixed in 2 hours. Yes, our city employees have the proper tools to do the job correctly. And yes, the trust. This city will earn your trust through consistently outdoing the poor job that it has done before. Look, we need to manage our people and manage our system. Thank you.
I want to serve this city as its next mayor. And in serving, I want to create a safe city, a dry city, a livable city, and one that's well-run. I believe my background, my experience, and my education demonstrates I'm capable to achieve that end, or those ends. The fact of the matter is, I'm the only candidate that has had executive experience, having worked with Dutch Mayoral as his executive counsel. I have worked with the legislature, having guided the city's legislative package through that maze that we call the Louisiana legislature. And I was blessed to serve you as a judge for over 20 years. I've been in the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government. I know government. I want to use that knowledge to serve you. Michael Bagnaris, my number is 33. Thank you.
My name is Edward Brewski, number 35. I'm a registered nurse at Tulane Hospital. I have a master's degree from Loyola in health management. As candidates are going to tell you, they've been part of this branch and this branch. I'm going to bring something, and that's trust, integrity, empathy. This city is broken, and it needs to be fixed. I can do this. I didn't manage millions of dollars and hundreds of people. I manage lives every night. Every single night when that patient's family member walks away from me, they look at me, and I look them in the eye, and I tell them, I got him. I got her. It's all right. That's what I want to do for you. I want to serve, but I want to lead from the front. Thank you very much. Number 35, Ben Franklin. I'll talk to you all out here in a minute.
All right. And to you, Mr. Doring.
New Orleans is almost 300 years old. We've been doing things in New Orleans a certain way for a very long time. However, fundamentally, if we're going to move forward into the 21st century, a ideology, perspective, and paradigm shift must take place in a way that we can make win-win situations. We can compete throughout the state and throughout the nation educationally, economically, politically, and as far as technology. The city of New Orleans is very historical and very cultural. We should keep those same historical positives in perspective. But when it relates to technology, when it relates to job growth, when it relates to going green, when it relates to fundamental collaboration, we need a strong leader with the 21st century ideology that can implement that effectively. Brandon Dorrington, number 40 on the ballot. Thank you very much.
Thank you all again. I have a demonstrated track record of listening, building consensus, and getting results for residents of our city. I want to serve you as your next mayor so we can get things done. I am the only candidate that has worked at the grassroots level on flood mitigation practices, ensuring that we're better than we were before. A public library and community center that captures over 90,000 gallons of rainwater today. A public school that captures over 100,000 gallons of rainwater happening right now in the city. In regards to housing, new construction, building LEED certified gold homes, LEED certified platinum as well. I want to make sure that our city and our people have hope, protection, and the opportunities that they need to reach their full potential in New Orleans. I want to serve you. I've demonstrated that. I have been in the forefront and on the line. I have the courage to stand up, the vision to lead, and of course, the empathy and the compassion to care about our people. LaToya Cantrell, thank you so much.
Good evening, and thank you for having us this evening. I'm Desiree Charbonnet. I've been serving as an elected official for nearly 20 years. My first 10 years was as the recorder of mortgages. During the storm, speaking of water, I was able to get my office back up and running within 6 weeks so that this community could have access to its land records, which it so desperately needed. Then I'm a judge at municipal court. I ran for judge, and the majority of that time, I was the chief judge, which means I managed the entire third branch of government for the city of New Orleans, the judicial branch of government. I am the only candidate who has dealt with crime on a day-to-day basis over 10 years. I understand how it starts. I understand how we can prevent it. I understand how we can deter and redirect young people away from a life of crime. Municipal court dealt with everything from truancy to domestic abuse battery, and so I have seen it all. I am asking you for your support this evening. I am prepared for this job, and I'm ready to work for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Johnny Smith, Kingdom Building. We must preserve ourselves. My number is 26. Johnny Smith offered you a golden ticket, tax-free, property tax. Second, this plan does not include rapid rebuilding, which everyone is going to need with these exodus of millions of people exiting out of state and coming into our state. We need to think like the ant and rebuild quickly. Finally, Captain Kirk. Calling on Mr. Sewell, think of Louisiana as a spaceship. Calling on Mr. Sewell, telling us to go to warp speed. He gets a call from Scotty, and he says, Captain, Sally can't move. Why? Because we have no infrastructure. We're not strong. We're not resilient. If we had our spaceship and we have to move away from the other 51 states, can we fly by ourselves? Can we be resilient by ourselves? If you say no, we can't move. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your thoughtful answers tonight. We really appreciate your taking time this evening. We hope that this forum has been informative to you. I want to encourage everyone to remain within the building, enjoy a drink at the bar if you can, and candidates, stick around and take a moment to visit with the voters if you're able to. And a few candidates who were not on the dais because they didn't return their RSVP forms in time are here with us, and you may want to speak to them as well. Thank you for being informed voters, and thank you for continuing to remain so throughout the election.